You can spend hours planning the perfect romantic evening, ensuring that everything is just right, the mood, the lighting, the ambience, and yet, your own body can sometimes throw the biggest wrench into your well-laid plans. That night was supposed to be flawless, or at least, that's what I had hoped for. It started out as a seemingly ordinary evening, though perhaps I should have taken the earlier signs as a warning. I had been looking forward to a romantic night with my partner for days. We both had busy schedules, and it felt like we hadn't had a chance to really connect in a while. So, when the opportunity presented itself, I wanted everything to be perfect. Of course, as with most things in life, perfect is often just an illusion. Earlier that evening, we had gone out for dinner. It wasn't anything too fancy, but it was one of our favorite restaurants. A cozy spot with just the right balance of comfort food and a laid-back atmosphere. I had been feeling a bit hungrier than usual that day, so when the menu came, I didn't hold back. I ordered a large appetizer, a hefty entree, and even dessert. The portions at this place were notoriously generous, but I wasn't one to waste food, so I cleared my plate. And then, of course, I washed it all down with a couple of glasses of wine. In hindsight, this was my first mistake. As we walked back to my place, I felt that familiar fullness settling in. It wasn't discomforting yet, but I could feel the weight of the meal sitting heavy in my stomach. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it would pass. After all, the night was still young, and I didn't want to ruin the mood by focusing on something as trivial as an overstuffed stomach. I even made a joke about how much I had eaten, and we both laughed it off. But by the time we got home, that heavy feeling had transformed into something more ominous. My stomach was noticeably bloated, and I could feel the pressure building as the food sat, seemingly undigested. I told myself it was just the wine and that it would settle soon enough. After all, I didn't want anything to interfere with the evening I had planned. We made our way to the bedroom and everything was perfect, or at least it should have been. The lighting was soft, casting a warm glow over the room. The music I had put on in the background was subtle, creating just the right atmosphere. My partner looked at me with that familiar glint in their eye, and I knew we were both on the same page. This was going to be one of those nights that we'd look back on and smile about. But then the gurgling started. At first, it was just a faint noise, low and barely noticeable. I thought it was something outside, a car driving by, perhaps. But then it happened again, this time louder, more distinct. It was coming from me. My stomach, now distended and full beyond its capacity, had begun to protest in the most embarrassing way possible. The gurgling grew louder, an almost comical series of rumblings that echoed through the quiet room. I could feel my face heating up in embarrassment as I tried to ignore it, hoping my partner hadn't noticed. But of course they had. How could they not? The sounds were impossible to miss, even over the soft music playing in the background. Still, they didn't say anything, probably trying to save me from feeling more embarrassed than I already was. Instead, they continued as if nothing had happened, hoping, I'm sure, that the noises would pass. They didn't. The gurgling became more frequent, the volume increasing with each passing minute. I could feel the pressure in my stomach building, and with it, the undeniable fact that this romantic evening was about to take a very unromantic turn. My body, full of food and wine, was not going to cooperate, no matter how much I willed it to. I shifted uncomfortably, trying to find a position that might alleviate some of the pressure, but nothing worked. The more I moved, the worse it seemed to get. My stomach was a symphony of embarrassing noises, and there was no way to stop it. At this point, my partner and I were both fully aware of what was happening, though neither of us had acknowledged it yet. The tension in the room was palpable, and not in a good way. Eventually, it became too much. The noises, the pressure, the sheer embarrassment of it all, I couldn't continue. I pulled away, my face red with shame, and muttered a hasty apology. My partner, ever understanding, gave me a sympathetic smile, but I could see the amusement in their eyes. The situation was so ridiculous that neither of us could pretend otherwise. I sat up, clutching my stomach, which was now making sounds that wouldn't be out of place in a sci-fi movie. I apologized again, feeling the awkwardness settle in. I couldn't believe that I had ruined the evening with something as ridiculous as a bloated stomach. The mood was officially dead, and all I could do was sit there, wishing for the ground to swallow me whole. But then, something unexpected happened. My partner started to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of genuine amusement, and before I knew it, I was laughing too. The whole situation was absurd. Here we were, in the middle of what was supposed to be a romantic night, and instead, my stomach was putting on a performance worthy of a comedy show. The more we laughed, the less embarrassed I felt. It was one of those moments where you realize that sometimes, life just doesn't go according to plan, and you have to roll with it. We spent the next few minutes sitting there, laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Every time I thought the laughter had died down, another gurgle would erupt from my stomach, and we'd both burst into giggles all over again. It wasn't the night I had envisioned, but in a strange way, it was even better. We were connecting not in the way I had planned, but in a way that felt real and unfiltered. Eventually, the gurgling subsided, though my stomach still felt uncomfortably full. We sat there in the quiet aftermath of our laughter, the romantic mood long gone, replaced by something else, something more intimate, perhaps. We didn't need to say anything. The awkwardness had passed, and we were left with a shared experience that, while not exactly what I had hoped for, was memorable in its own right. I couldn't stop apologizing for the rest of the night, even though my partner assured me it was fine. They teased me, saying that maybe next time I should skip the 3-course meal before a romantic evening. I laughed it off, but I knew they were right. I had learned my lesson the hard way. Nothing too heavy or spicy before a night like this. My stomach simply couldn't handle it, and I wasn't about to go through this level of embarrassment again. In the days that followed, I couldn't help but think about that night. While it hadn't gone the way I had planned, there was something comforting in the fact that we had been able to laugh about it. It showed me that intimacy isn't always about perfect moments or flawless execution. Sometimes, it's about being vulnerable, letting your guard down, and embracing the imperfections of life. From that point on, I made a mental note to be more mindful of what I ate before intimate moments. No more heavy meals, no more indulgent desserts, and definitely no more wine on an empty stomach. I stuck to lighter fare, salads, maybe a small piece of grilled chicken, and water instead of wine. It wasn't as indulgent, but it certainly saved me from any more embarrassing stomach symphonies. Looking back, I realized that night was a turning point in our relationship. It wasn't about the romantic gestures or the perfect setting. It was about how we handled life's little interruptions. In the end, it was the laughter that brought us closer, the shared experience of something so ridiculous that it became unforgettable. I'll always remember that evening, not as a disaster, but as a lesson in humility and humor. Life, after all, is rarely perfect. But if you can laugh at yourself and find joy in the moments that don't go according to plan, you'll realize that those are often the moments that matter most.